is defect reporting. Like once you have test cases, so you execute your test cases, you identify which is passed, which is failed. So how to report your defects? This is also, we have a process, like how you're going to record your defects and things like that. That comes under defect reporting, right? So it's basically defect is an error in coding which causes incorrect or unexpected result from the software program which does not meet actual requirements, right? So it's not meeting the actual requirement. So we're going to classify as a defect, right? So these testers might come across as the defects while executing test cases, right? So this is a simple definition of a defect. Then how are we going to do the defect reporting, right? So when you are reporting a defect, we need to include these fields, like these values, so that we can easily track where is the defect raised, who raised the defect, which functionality has this defect. So when is the defect raised, right? And when it is fixed by the developer, and what is the severity and priority, right? These things need to be included in any bug report, right? So basically defect ID, this is unique identification of the defect. So then defect description, like we want to detail, put detailed steps of what is the defect and how to replicate. If there is any release version of the application, you want to write the release version. Then detailed steps along with screenshots, right? You may have to take some screenshots so that developer can easily reproduce that issue defect, right? When it is raised, a reference, right? Reference like from which requirement this issue came, or which design or architecture. Even your test case number, right? You can also put your test case number from where this defect is raised, detected by who raised the defect. What is the status? Status in the sense, is it open, is being fixed or fixed, retesting, or closed, and all that. That is the status. So fixed by who is the developer who fixed it, if it is fixed, and date when the defect is closed, right? Once developer fixes it, we want to retest and we will close the defect if it is working fine. That is the date closed. The severity, right? So severity, which describes impact of the defect on the application, like how critical, how important is this issue, right, in the application, like whether it's critical, medium, low, right? That is severity. And priority, right? Priority is defect fixing urgency. So like, is it important to fix now, or we can fix it like after some time, right? That's the priority. And severity, there are two things you need to understand here. So severity and priority could be high, low, medium. So both can be high, low, medium, but severity is basically what is the impact on the application, and priority is related to how fast we need to fix this issue, right? So which is related to fixing urgency, right? So both of them can have like high, medium, low, critical states, different states. So these are.
Hello, sir. Based on severity, we decide priority.
Priority depends on the team, right? Not always. Severity is like whenever there is high severe, they will fix it first. But there is a low severity issues will be fixed later, right? So it depends on like project team, right, which they want to fix. So severity will decide. Priority, it can be decided by test manager or like development manager whether they want to fix it now or they want to fix it later. It's a time
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
time factor.
Okay.
So that is how we raise defects. Basically, defect management process is basically systematic process to identify defects, right? So defect discovery of defect categorization, fixing of defects by developers, verification, defect closure, and defect reports at the end of the report, right? So when you test, right, we're going to raise defects and it will get categorized like by priority or severity and all. Then they'll be fixing the bugs and defects by developers. Then we'll do verification of by testers, then defect closure, and at the end of the project, we're going to do defect reports. Say how many defects raised in the project and how many are closed, how many are still open, and things like that. Sometimes not all the issues will be closed. There may be some open defects, so that will be put into the next cycle, like next development cycle or things like that. So this is basically a defect management process. So this is the cycle. So discovery, categorization, resolution, verification, and all. This process goes through. So when the discovery phase, we are basically testing the application to identify as many defects as possible, right? So in this case, we are going to execute all the scenarios so that we created before and test all the application and create as many defects as possible so that before customer can discover it, right? The testing process, we need to identify all the issues. So that is called the discovery phase, right? So a defect is said to be discovered and change status to accepted when it is acknowledged and accepted by the developers, right? So even though we raise some defects, it may be sometimes developers may not accept it, right? They may want some additional proof or they may think it is not a bug, right? So they will review and then they will accept it. So once it is accepted, it will go into developer to fix that bug defect, right? So basically discover the defect, right? Report the defect and accept the defect. So that is the discovery phase. So we're going to test, find out all the defects there. Then we have like categorization. So basically categorization in the sense, so it's the critical, high, medium, or low, right? So critical in the sense, so the defect needs to be fixed immediately because it can cause great damage to the product, right? So they cannot avoid critical defects, right? Something like login, if it is logging with incorrect login, user ID or password, that is a critical defect. So they need to fix it immediately. A defect with category high is an important feature that have to, so it's like a little lower level from critical, but they need to fix as well, right? It's an important feature. Medium is it's a minimal deviation from the requirements. Maybe like it's causing some so incorrect behavior or something, which is not that much impact, but they have to take a look at that, right? So lower means a very minor effect on the application, so there is no problem using the application, but it's probably kind of an inconvenience or that can be a smaller issue that can be fixed later, right? This is the categorization process, right? So here there is an example, right? So these are, say, assume like these are some of the defects that are found, like website performance is slow, right? So what do you think is this kind of a defect? What is the severity? Is it critical, high, medium, low? Something like that. Is it critical or high? The performance? Right? It should be critical, right? If performance is low, it's not usable, right? So then login function of the website not working. This is also an important issue.
Sir, what is showstopper?
Showstopper is something they cannot use the application anymore with that issue, right? That is a critical issue, like critical issue called as showstopper. Right? Something like say, website performance is slow, so they cannot use the application properly. So it will be kind of a showstopper, a critical issue, right? So like a login
Both
function of the,
critical and showstoppers are both are same, sir.
yeah, both are same. Yeah, they are related. Yeah. The critical in the sense, if you see definition of critical, so it need to be fixed immediately because it may cause great damage to the product, right? So basically, if something like a showstopper bug, they cannot even give that fix without fixing that. They cannot give it to the client. It's a very very important function, like critical function, right? So it's basically a critical feature. They call it as showstoppers, right? So they cannot progress anymore with the release when there is a showstopper bug. It's another basically another word for critical bugs, right? And third one is UI of the website does not display correctly on mobile devices, right? So this is basically it is working on say browsers correctly, but it's not working properly on mobile devices. So this can be like a medium or high issue. They can still use the application, but only they cannot use it on the mobile applications, right? So this one, the last, fourth one is website could not remember the user login session. So when it could not remember the login session, they cannot use the application properly. That becomes like a critical issue. So some links not working, this can be low or medium kind of an issue, right? So here is how this categorization happens, right? So when performance is slow, it becomes high. So what is why it is high? Because the performance bug can cause huge inconvenience to user. So they can still use the application, but because it is slow, so they may get frustrated or they cannot use some functions and things like that, right? So that becomes like a high priority issue. Then login function of the website does not work means like it's a critical, right? They cannot. So login is one of the main functions of the say banking website. If this does not work, it is a serious bug, right? So they cannot use application anymore. So this is kind of a showstopper bug, right? If login doesn't work, then UI of the application does not display correctly on mobile devices. So basically, only if somebody is using on the mobile, they will have issue. So this is like a medium issue. So the fourth one is high because the user session is not stored, right? User cannot see any other screens because of the fourth, it will be high, right? The fifth one is some links doesn't work, right? So it's a low priority. It's easy fix for development guys. User can still access the site without these links, right? So users can still access some part of the application without any problem. So this is how you classify the defects based on how important is that for the application, right? So remember this criteria, like something which needs to be fixed immediately is critical. Something which impacts main features is high. Some minimal deviation from the requirements is medium, and minor effect is a low categorization. So you can refer to this example and right to understand like which is critical, which is not critical, which is high, and all that stuff, right? So that's the defect categorization, right? The next step is defect resolution. So defect resolution is basically step-by-step process for fixing the defects, right? So defect resolution starts with assigning defects to developers. Then developers schedule defect to be fixed as per priority. So this is a priority, right? As per priority, right? So they get assigned some priority to the defect. So based on the priority, they will fix, say, high priority defects first, then medium, then low, right? So that is the priority. Severity is how critical. So severity is the importance of the defect. Priority is when to fix it, right? Then defects are fixed. Finally, developers will send a report of resolution to test manager. So this basically helps to fix and track defects easily. So this is how basically happens. You assign the defect to the developer. They schedule some time to fix it, right? They fix the defect and they will send that this fix is defect is fixed, ready for testing or things like that. So that is the defect resolution. So this basically is the steps, right? Assignment is assigned to a developer or other technician to fix and change the status to like responding, like whatever status they have, or development or whatever. Then schedule fixing. So developer side takes charge in this phase. They will create a schedule to fix these defects and depending on the defect priority, right? Then fix the defect. While the development team is fixing the defect, test manager tracks the progress process of fixing defects compared to the above schedule. So he will track, so he will like estimate like when these defects will be fixed, when they will be ready for testing and all. And then so once they will get a report of resolution from the developers when defects are fixed, right? So that means they are ready for retesting. So when the defect is fixed, I think it's simple. Then once it is fixed, so we'll be assigned to testing team. So we'll verify the defects and we'll resolve the defect, right? So this is like some example scenario. So when say like suppose you have like 61 defects that are fixed, we're going to retest those fixes and verify them, right? Retest those. So once it is resolved and verified, the defect status will be changed to closed. Otherwise, it will be, if it is not working, you will send it back, send them back for refixing, right? So once it is closed, there is no further action required on the defect, right? That is the cycle. Basically, defect reporting is basically once all the testing and defects are completed, there will be some report that will be sent to the management, right, for tracking purpose. So basically, defect reporting helps to better communicate, track, and explain defects in detail, right? So the management team will understand how many defects raised and how many are fixed, and what is the status and all that in this defect report. So there are two important factors in this defect reporting. So one is defect rejection ratio and defect leakage ratio, right? So there are two terms. Basically, defect rejection ratio is number of defects rejected by total number of defects raised. Suppose when you raise the defects, sometimes the developers will think like this is not a bug and they will reject it. So that is the number of defects rejected by total number of defects raised. So if you are raising many defects which are rejected, that means either our scenarios are wrong or our test cases are not done properly, right? So this ratio should be less, right? Defect rejection ratio should be less. And defect leakage ratio, right? Sometimes we may miss some testing part and we may miss some defects. It may be found during user testing or user acceptance and things like that. It's called defect leakage ratio, like number of defects missed by total number of defects in the software. So this number also should be less, and it should be less than 5% for the software, the testing to be effective. Right? If this ratio is high means so there is some gap either in the test cases or testing that is being done, and we need to revisit the test cases or testing and fix those gaps. Right? So remember these two ratios.
Sir, what are the categories for severity?
Categories in the sense? Severity is
Same
also
like
same. Yeah, it's the same as these: critical, high, medium, low. So severity and priority, yeah, both of them have the same category.
Sir, then what is high priority, low severity, and low severity, high priority?
See, low severity in the sense it's not like an important function, but like user can request like, no, I need that to be fixed immediately. Like sometimes it may be like user still can use that application without much effect, but they may want like a quick fix, right? So they have like if user wants that to be fixed immediately, so we have to put like high priority, but even though the severity is less, right? Got it?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So priority means like whether we need to fix that today or tomorrow. That is a priority. Severity is like whether how much that is affecting the application, right? Sometimes even though it is low severity, user may want to fix that immediately. Then we have to assign high priority to that defect, right? So it depends on user like management team or like development team decision. So they can assign a different priority to that defect. Right? So severity is basically the importance of the application functionality. Priority is the timing when that needs to be fixed. Whether that needs to be fixed immediately or we can do it like after some time, something like that.
Okay, sir.
So this is defect metrics. So these two metrics are important. So the acceptable ratio is up 5 to 10% range, right? Defect rejection ratio or defect leakage ratio. If it is not within this range, there is something missing in the testing process, right? We need to fix the testing process. It can be like the test cases that are created in the application are not up to the mark. So we need to revisit the test cases. Spend more time testing execution, especially reviewing the test execution results. Like say if you have like too many rejected defects, that means we are not, the execution is not correct. So we need to spend more time executing test cases properly. Defect leakage means we are missing defects in the sense, so maybe our test cases are not completely done properly. So we need to update test cases and execute those new test cases again. Right. So these are the important metrics. So this is all about defect management process. So we have all these states: discovery, categorization, resolution, verification, closure, and reporting. So these are the cycles in the defect process, right? So once this cycle is completed, we'll have this test closure. So we'll create a summary document when you're doing like a test closure. right? Test closure is a document that gives summary of all the tests conducted during the software development life cycle, right? So the whole development life cycle, so this test closure will give summary of all the tests conducted during that development life cycle, right? So it also gives detailed analysis of bugs removed and errors found, right? We still want to track like what are the bugs that are fixed, what are the errors found during the application process, development or testing process. So that will be helpful for future development cycles, right? So where the defects came and why they came and all that analysis will be done based on this test closure, right? So test closure is a memo that is prepared prior to formally completing the testing process. So this is the final document that gets created before we close the testing process. So these are some of the activities, right? Ensure test completion, making sure all testing work has actually happened, has been completed and concluded, right? And our test artifacts. So we have deliverables at different stages that needs to be handed over to people who need to see those in future, like project managers, business managers, and all that. Project retrospective, that is basically the feedback mechanism. So what has happened in the project and what are the things completed, what are the problems faced, and things like that, right? And archive test work products. We're going to archive all the documents that are generated so that you can refer back to, like for future projects and all that. So once this is done, the testing will be we will say like testing is completed, right? So when should be testing stopped? So when all these things are met, right? 100% requirement coverage is achieved and compiled. Defects of all sorts are dealt with properly and resolved. So all tests must be passed at least 95%. So this is a category for completing the testing part, right? That's the last phase of the testing, right? So this is this is mostly like a documentation part. So understanding like these test case design techniques and defect reporting is critical for testing teams, right? So we are in manual part of manual testing. So this test case designs and defect raising, finding defects is important part of it. So go through these slides. So these are very important part of testing activities. Right. Okay. So any questions so far on the topics we had today? So you guys went through these entry exit criteria for testing life cycle, right? If you are not, go through these tables again, right? These entry exit criteria are important, like what is inputs for each stage and what are the outputs and all. This is very important. And yeah, so I think now we have some idea on like what is the testing process. So we have like what are the documents that created, how to generate test cases, what are the defects and severity and things like that. So I will show that project tomorrow. I will show the actual requirements, what are test cases generated, and how we track the test execution, right? Pass, fail, and the reports and all. I will show samples tomorrow, right?